This happened a few months ago. I was 30 and working as a security guard at an old, abandoned factory. I took the job out of necessity. Times were tough, and I needed the money to support my family. I had moved back in with my parents after losing my previous job. The factory was huge, with rusted metal and overgrown grass everywhere. Every time I walked through the heavy metal door, it creaked like it was warning me. One stormy night, the rain was pounding against the roof. I was going through my usual routine, checking the monitors and pacing the empty halls when the lights began to flicker. At first, I thought it was just bad wiring. But every flicker made my heart race. It felt wrong. I knew something strange was happening, but I didn't know what. This continued for my next few shifts. The flickering lights became constant. On top of that, I started hearing clanging sounds echoing through the factory. It was as if someone was moving heavy machinery. There shouldn't have been anyone there. I told myself it was just my imagination. But the more I heard, the more uneasy I became. One night, I stumbled across fresh footprints in the dust. My heart dropped. I thought maybe some kids were messing around, or maybe it was a prank. I moved in for a closer look, but the air felt heavy around me. I was sure something was watching me. I could feel my skin prickling. I slowly backed away from the footprints. My gut told me to get out of there. As I turned to go back to my post, I saw the lights flicker again. This time, they blinked erratically, almost as if they were trying to communicate with me. It made my breath hitch in my throat. I felt trapped in that unsettling atmosphere. I tried to shake it off, pushing myself to be rational. But I could feel that tightness in my chest every time I went back. Then, one night, something shifted. I caught a glimpse of a shadow moving along the wall. It was quick, almost gone before I realized what I saw. I froze, unable to breathe. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like lead. I turned around, thinking maybe someone was there, but nothing. Just darkness and silence. I had to convince myself it was nothing, but doubt hung heavily in the air. Each night grew longer than the last. I wanted to leave, but something kept pulling me back. A part of me craved an explanation. Was it all in my head? As the storms raged on outside, I started to wonder if I was losing my grip. I never found answers to my questions. The flickering lights, the strange sounds, the eerie footprints, all of it haunted me. I still don't know what lurks in that factory. Maybe it was just me going mad. Maybe it was something more. But I can't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in there. And now, I can't help but wonder if I ever will be. The next night, the rain fell harder than ever. I arrived at the factory feeling even more on edge than before. I tried to remind myself it was just a job. A paycheck. But that fact felt distant as I stepped inside. The familiar creaking door echoed around me, a chorus of anxious warning. I switched on the monitors, hoping to focus on something else. As I did, I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being watched. I glanced over my shoulder every few minutes, half expecting to see a figure standing in the shadows. But it was always just darkness. After an hour, the lights started flickering again. This time, it felt more aggressive, as if they were demanding my attention. I took a deep breath and forced myself to concentrate. But then I heard it. The clanging noise returned, louder than before. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I felt a cold sweat on the back of my neck. Compelled by curiosity and dread, I left the control room, gripping my flashlight like a lifeline. As I moved deeper into the factory, I traced the echoes until I reached an old machinery room. The air was thick and stale, and the shadows loomed larger in the corners. That's when I saw it. A small metal door, partially ajar. I hadn't noticed it before. The door led to a narrow hallway, and I suddenly felt an urge to push it open. My heart thundered in my chest. This could be my chance to finally find answers. But doubt crept back in. What if something was waiting for me inside? I hesitated, then inched the door open. A gust of cold air rushed out, brushing against my skin. I peered into the darkness. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling in the stillness. No response. I swallowed hard and stepped inside. The sound of clanging grew louder, resounding like a sinister rhythm. I followed it, my nerves taut as a wire. The hallway twisted and turned, leading me into an even darker section of the factory. Flickering lights illuminated the peeling walls, and the shadows seemed to dance mockingly, and then, without warning, everything went dark. The lights died completely, enveloping me in complete blackness. My breath quickened, and panic bubbled up. I fumbled for my flashlight, feeling for the reassuring weight in my pocket. When I finally found it and clicked it on, the beam shook in my hands, when I saw something move at the far end of the hallway. A figure. Tall and dark. It stood completely still, but I could sense it was watching me. My heart raced as I blinked hard, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But this time, denial felt weak. Without thinking, I turned and ran. My feet pounded against the concrete floor as I raced back through the twisting hallways. I could hear my own heartbeat ringing in my ears. I had to get out. I burst into the machinery room, gasping for breath, and slammed the door behind me. I pressed my back against it, trying to calm myself down. But the fear didn't leave me. Maybe this place wasn't just abandoned. Maybe something was truly haunting it. I felt an unshakable conviction that I had to uncover the truth, before it was too late. I stood by the door, my heart racing, listening intently for any sign of movement beyond the machinery room. The oppressive silence was maddening. I had to remind myself that I was alone here, yet the air felt heavy with tension, as if someone or something was waiting for me to make a move. I took a deep breath and glanced around the room. The rusted machinery was still, but now I noticed something unusual in the corner, a toolbox I didn't remember seeing before. It was old and covered in dust, but the latch was slightly open, as if someone had hastily abandoned it. Curious, I approached and knelt down. I clicked my flashlight beam into the box, revealing a jumble of tools, but one item caught my eye, a small notebook wedged between a wrench and a pair of pliers. I carefully pulled it out. The cover was battered, but the pages inside were surprisingly intact. I flipped through. The writing was cramped and uneven, filled with frantic notes and sketches. As I read, a chill ran down my spine. The notes talked about strange noises in the factory, sightings of a shadowy figure, and warnings about not being alone at night. The last entry was concerning a scribbled message that read, "Don't trust the silence." Just as I registered the weight of those words, the lights flickered back to life, shaking the shadows from the corners. My heart sank when I felt the temperature drop even further. This wasn't just stale air, it felt alive, as if the darkness itself was pushing against me. I stood up quickly, instinctively clutching the notebook to my chest. A sound echoed again from the hallway, the same clanging I had heard before. It pierced the air, but this time there was a rhythm to it, almost like a heartbeat. I felt my instincts kick in, urging me to escape, but there was something about the notebook that latched onto me. I had to understand what was happening here. Clutching the flashlight tightly, I slowly opened the door, creaking open, revealing the shadowy hallway once more. The clanging noise reverberated, guiding me deeper than before. I stepped cautiously, each footfall wary, following the sound that felt like it was calling me closer. Then, the lights flickered once more, but they didn't just fail. They spluttered violently, and for a moment, I saw the figure again, just at the end of the hall, impossibly still. My stomach dropped as it seemed to elongate, warping against the light. It felt like it was reaching for me. I blinked, and suddenly the figure was gone, swallowed back into the thick darkness at the end of the hallway. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I pressed forward, the notebook burning in my hands. I had to know what it wanted, what was hiding in the shadows. As I edged further into the darkness, a sudden crash echoed from somewhere deeper in the factory, sending adrenaline straight to my bloodstream. I couldn't go back now. I had to find out what lay ahead, even as dread whispered in my ear that I was stepping into something far more dangerous than I imagined. The corridor narrowed as I moved deeper into the factory. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but the shadows seemed to seep back in, almost mocking my attempts to illuminate the path ahead. I gripped the notebook tightly, hoping it would offer some semblance of guidance or at least a clue about what I was facing. As I walked, the rhythmic clanging intensified, pulsing in time with my own heartbeat. It echoed through the hallway, bouncing off walls and filling the air with an urgency I couldn't shake. I felt like a moth drawn to a flame, but I couldn't ignore the unease curling in my stomach. Suddenly, the factory floor creaked beneath my feet. I paused, listening. The clangs had morphed into a scraping sound, harsh and jarring. It was closer now, as if whatever was making it had moved, inching nearer to me. I took a deep breath and pressed on, my flashlight flickering slightly. Then I saw it, a heavy metal door halfway ajar, the source of the noise. It was unlike the others, adorned with ancient locks and brittle-looking cables. A chill washed over me as I approached. The scraping intensified, an unnerving scrape followed by a distinct thud, like something heavy being dropped. I hesitated. A million thoughts raced through my mind. The notes had warned me about fearsome things lurking in silence, and now, the factory was anything but quiet. I could feel a pull toward the door, as if it was inviting me in. But in the pit of my stomach, doubt writhed like a snake, driven by an uncontrollable urge. I pushed the door open wider, wincing at the protesting metal. The inside was dim, shadows obscuring much of what lay beyond. Stepping inside, the air changed instantly, dense and cold. My flashlight revealed a workbench cluttered with tools and odd scraps of machinery. Gears lay scattered, and faded photographs were tacked up on the peeling walls, images of workers, some smiling, others looking troubled. I moved closer to a photo pinned at eye level. It was a group shot, but the faces looked strangely familiar. I started to recall snippets from my childhood, memories of stories told in whispers. Had I known any of these people? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it again, a flicker of movement. I swung the flashlight quickly, but there was nothing there. My heart raced. I told myself it was my imagination, but the sensation of being watched prickled at my skin. Ignoring the urge to flee, I returned my attention to the workbench, scanning for anything that might help make sense of this place. That's when I noticed a small metal box partially hidden under a pile of tools. My curiosity overpowered my fear. I reached down, the cold metal startling against my palm. As I lifted it, the scraping noise returned, a harsh rustle behind me. I whipped around. The door had swung shut, and I was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from my flashlight. Panic surged as I hurriedly rattled the box open. Inside, I found a collection of faded documents. My breath hitched when I read the top one, Project Lazarus, Reanimation. Before I could process what that meant, the scraping grew closer. I felt the ground tremble slightly, and a shadow shifted at the edge of my light. A figure loomed just beyond the darkness, no longer just a fleeting vision. It was here, and it was coming for me. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. Every nerve in my body screamed for me to run, but my feet felt glued to the spot. The flashlight beam flickered again, and with it, the figure became clearer, a silhouette, tall and twisted, as if it were made from the very shadows around it. The scraping noise came again, a sharp sound that echoed off the metal walls. I squinted, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure moved closer, its form shifting in and out of focus, like a mirage. I could just make out a grotesque face, half hidden in darkness, its eyes reflecting a dreadful hunger. I forced myself to breathe, clutching the metal box. The documents rattled inside, and I realized I couldn't stay here. I needed a way out. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned toward the door, my heart pounding like a war drum. As I reached for the handle, the weight of fear pressed down on me. It can't be real, I muttered under my breath. But the sensation of being hunted felt all too real. Just as my fingers brushed the cold metal, the scrape intensified, resonating with an angry growl. I hesitated, fighting the urge to scream, when I noticed something odd on the floor, a set of prints leading deeper into the shadows. They were large and irregular, like something that shouldn't have existed. I felt a pull to follow, my curiosity battling my instincts. What if it led to answers? The box in my hand felt like a secret I had to uncover. Steeling myself, I stepped back, letting the beam of my flashlight illuminate the trail. The prints led away from me and deeper into the darkness. It felt reckless, but it also felt like the only option. If I stayed, the unseen threat would surely consume me. I followed the prints, moving cautiously, each step echoing softly against the metal floor. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of rust and something else I couldn't identify. Decay? The thought made my skin crawl. Then the sound changed again, a deep, guttural growl that sent ice down my spine. I swung around, shining my light, but nothing was there. The shadows felt thicker, like they were closing in on me. I had to keep moving. As I rounded a corner, the prints ended abruptly, and I found myself in a large, open space. Machines loomed like giants, their outlines blurred in the darkness. My breath caught when I noticed a flickering light ahead, pulsing eerily like a heartbeat. There, at the heart of the space, was a console, alive with screens displaying fragmented images of the same faces from the photographs, their expressions twisted in agony. I felt drawn to it, an inexplicable need to understand what I was seeing. As I stepped closer, however, the growl returned, louder this time, more threatening. It resonated through my chest, vibrating with anger and desperation. Whatever was in the shadows wasn't just watching, it was waiting. And then, the chilling realization hit me, the eyes in the darkness were not merely observing. They were hungry. I turned to run, but a loud crash erupted behind me. Something massive was moving, and I could hear its breath, hot and menacing, that I needed to escape. My life depended on it. I bolted down the hallway, the shadows seeming to stretch and lunge after me. Every footfall echoed against the metal floor, a sharp reminder of how vulnerable I was. The growl followed me, a haunting symphony of dread that wrapped around my thoughts. I had to find a way out. In the chaos, I stumbled past enormous machines, their bleak shapes looming like ancient giants. I needed a plan, but my mind was blank. I could almost feel the creature's hot breath at my back, urging me to push faster, to explore beyond the limits of fear. With the console behind me and all its horrifying images, I blanked that memory, focusing instead on what lay ahead. Turning a sharp corner, I spotted another door. This one looked more promising, a heavy metal door with a small window. My heart pounded louder as I tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. I shook it hard, desperation clawing at my throat. "Please!" I yelled, the sound echoing back at me in the emptiness. I heard something shift behind me. The growl grew closer, and I was done for if I didn't get moving. Leaving the door, I raced to the next opening, a corridor that branched off into darkness. I chose it, body trembling as I sprinted forward. The growl bounced off the steel, sounding almost satisfied, as if it relished my panic. As I plunged deeper, I caught a whiff of something burning, exhaust, maybe? It filled my lungs, but I forced myself to ignore it. The faint glow of emergency lights flickered overhead, directing me like a strange guiding star. I needed to keep pushing. Then I saw it, an open room to my left. Hope surged within me as I darted inside, scanning the area. It was a small utility closet, cluttered with equipment and supplies. Far from ideal, but it could buy me a moment. I ducked inside, dropping to the floor and trying to quiet my breathing. I heard the door slam open behind me. Panic raced through me as I pressed my back against the wall, the shadows swirling outside. I could hear the creature sniffing the air, low growls rumbling like distant thunder. It was hunting. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of a monitor hanging crookedly above a shelf. My flashlight beam caught the screen, flickering through static, but then it stabilized, revealing a live feed of multiple rooms in this maze of metal. My stomach dropped. There were people in those rooms disheveled and tied down. Their faces were blank from shock but very much alive. I fumbled for my phone, hoping to find a signal. Nothing. I was trapped in a nightmare with no one to help. Then, the growl sharpened, and the creature tore through the closet door like it was made of cardboard. I hit the floor, scrambling back against the wall. I could see its featureless silhouette in the doorway, blotting out the dim light. Just when I thought I was done for, something caught my eye: an emergency exit sign hanging above a flickering light, further down the corridor I had just fled. The thought of escape fueled my desperation, but the creature lunged forward, teeth bared and eyes wide with hunger. I had no choice. In that instant, it was clear, I needed to run again, this time, toward the exit. Moving without thinking, I launched myself into the narrow space between the shelves, heart racing. I could hear it crashing behind me, the sound of metal on metal tearing through the air. And just as I broke free, a realization crystallized in the chaos: I wasn't just escaping. I was uncovering something much more sinister than I could have ever imagined. The emergency exit sign loomed closer, the light flickering like a heartbeat. I pushed myself faster, my legs burning with the effort. The growl behind me was almost deafening now, a primal instinct driving it towards me. It thrived on my terror, and I could feel that undeniable truth in my bones. I reached the door and barely hesitated before yanking it open. It groaned on its hinges as I slipped through, heart hammering in my chest. I slammed it shut behind me but didn't have time to breathe. I was now in another corridor, dimly lit and eerily quiet. The buzzing of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, cutting the darkness but doing little to ease my dread. I pressed on, glancing over my shoulder, half expecting the creature to burst through the door. Every sound sounded like it was magnified: a door creaking, a distant clang, the uneven thud of my own heartbeat. I needed to find a safe place. My brain raced as I recalled the monitor and those trapped people. Were they experiments? How did I end up in this hell? Stumbling forward, my foot caught on something smooth. I fell hard, sprawling across the floor. I glanced down and saw a small, metallic object: a keycard. Relief flooded through me. Maybe this could get me out of here. I scrambled to my feet and pocketed the card. Just ahead, I spotted another door, this one appearing more official than the others. I dashed towards it, a sliver of hope igniting within me. I reached for the handle, my fingers brushing the cool surface. The door swung open with a soft click, and I slipped inside. The room was a small office, cluttered with papers and old monitors. The air was thick with neglect, a stark contrast to the chaos I had just come from. I felt a momentary sense of safety, bolstered by the presence of the desk between me and the door. Taking a deep breath, I began rifling through the paperwork. Maybe I'd find answers, some clue about what was happening. When I noticed something alarming: a series of photographs taped to a corkboard. I stepped closer, squinting at the images. They depicted the same type of people I had seen on the monitor earlier: pale, wide-eyed, and gaunt. My stomach churned. The captions beneath read like labels for livestock, a chilling blend of numbers and notes about their progress. I felt sick. A sudden crash echoed from beyond the door. I spun around, heart racing again. I was still trapped, with nowhere to run. The creature's growls deepened, filling the air with a terrifying promise. Panic surged through me once more, and I backed away from the board, my eyes darting around for an escape route. Then I noticed another door on the opposite side of the room, slightly ajar. I could hear voices beyond it, muffled yet urgent. It was my only chance. I couldn't linger any longer. Just as I reached for the handle, a loud bang erupted from the first door I had entered. My heart dropped. The creature was coming. I gripped the handle tighter, and in that moment of decision, I knew I had to confront whatever waited outside. I flung the door open, adrenaline surging through me as I stepped into the unknown. I stepped through the door and froze. The hallway outside was dim but alive with movement. Shadows flickered along the walls, cast from an overhead flashlight swinging erratically. I barely had time to process this when a voice pierced through the tension. "Over here. Quickly." I turned to see a figure approaching, a man, disheveled yet familiar. It was hard to tell in the low light, but I recognized the look of someone who had been through hell. He was wide-eyed and frantic, his sweat-soaked shirt clinging to him. "Come on. We need to move," he said, his voice urgent that I didn't wait to question him. I instinctively followed as he ducked into a side corridor. The growls behind me had grown fainter but didn't vanish entirely, a lingering reminder of the threat that pursued. As we hurried along, I glanced at him. "Who are you? What is going on?" "Just keep moving. I'll explain later," he replied. That we rushed down the narrow passage, checking over our shoulders as we went. Every corner felt like it could become a trap. I could feel the sweat running down my back and my heart thudding in my chest. Then we burst through a door and found ourselves in a larger room. It looked like a staging area of some sort. Crates were stacked haphazardly, and an array of equipment lay scattered across tables. Medical tools glinted under the flickering light, and the sight set my nerves on fire. "Are those?" I started, but he cut me off. "No time. We can't linger." He led me across the room and into another corridor that seemed to move downward. The walls were damp and cold against my skin. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched from somewhere deep in the shadows. "Why are we here?" I asked again. "Testing facility," he said, casting a glance back at me. "They're experimenting on people. Those photographs you saw? Those are the results. We have to get out before they find us." A chill ran through me. My mind raced back to the faces in the pictures, the lost expressions captured on that corkboard. "You're saying they're all just move?" he shouted, panic washing over him. I followed him deeper into the facility, my mind spinning from the implications. I needed answers, but right now, survival was the priority. Finally, he stopped at a locked door, his hands fumbling over a keypad. "This leads to the outside, but I need the code." As he struggled, I looked back down the corridor. The growl had returned, closer this time. Fear flooded my veins, and I felt my stomach drop. "Come on," I urged. The door beeped, and it swung open. But just as we stepped through, a loud crash shattered the air. A figure loomed at the end of the corridor, massive and unyielding. I couldn't make out any details, it was too dark, but the silhouette alone filled me with dread. "Run!" the man shouted, pulling me inside the door just as I felt a rush of cold air sweep past us. But before we could turn to barricade the entrance, he glanced back and his eyes widened. "No, not now." The door slammed shut, but the pounding from the other side surged like thunder, accompanied by feral growls echoing in the cramped space. My breath caught in my throat as I pressed against the wall, realizing this new room offered no guarantees of safety. "What's next?" I stammered, anxiety creeping back into my mind. Just as he opened his mouth to respond, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. That's when I heard a low, rumbling growl that sent shivers down my spine. We were not alone. The darkness wrapped around us like a thick blanket, and I could feel the man's breath quicken beside me. I strained my ears, trying to locate that growl, but the sound ricocheted off the walls, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. "Do you have a flashlight?" I whispered, hoping the answer was yes. "No time," he replied, a tremor in his voice. "Follow my lead." I nodded, though panic clawed at my insides. He edged slowly toward the door we had just entered, feeling along the wall for the handle. Each touch felt loud in the silence, and my heart raced with every creak of the floor beneath us. Suddenly, the lights flickered back to life, only to reveal the room was filled with unsettling silhouettes. The table we had raced past earlier was now occupied by someone. My stomach churned as I took in the scene. A figure lay on the table, bound by thick straps. Their face was contorted in pain, and I could see the faint twitch of fingers that had lost all hope. I recognized the expression. They were one of the people from the photographs. Panic surged through me, and I took a step back, colliding with the man beside me. "Stay quiet," he hissed, urgency spilling from his tone. I didn't want to draw attention, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the tableau of horror. Medical instruments lined the nearby shelf, their sharp tips glistening, ominous under the harsh lights. What had they done to this person? Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement. Another shape stirred on a different table, and that's when everything changed. The second figure roared, a guttural noise that filled the room as they sat up. I could barely make out their twisted features, but it was clear they were far from okay. "Run!" the man shouted again. This time, I didn't hesitate. We bolted towards the back of the room, ignoring the way the screams echoed behind us. The growl grew louder, and I could hear footsteps thudding behind us. My instincts screamed at me to keep running, but a fleeting thought stopped me. "Wait!" I gasped, pulling at the man's arm. "Where are we going?" "There's an exit in the sub-level," he said, urgency flashing in his eyes. "We can lose them in the lower tunnels." "Lower tunnels?" I echoed, my mind racing. It sounded risky, but then again, so did staying here. I swallowed hard and nodded. "Let us go." We dashed for a door that led further down, the faint wail of something monstrous trailing us. I could feel the vibrations on the floor, like something massive was pushing its way to find us. The door slammed shut behind us, and the man slammed the lock into place. "Now what?" I asked, scanning the space we had entered. "Now we hope it buys us some time," he replied, glancing around. The room was dim, but I could see the outlines of more crates stacked against the walls. "Time for what?" I pressed, fear and confusion twisting my gut. "Time to figure out how to escape this place before we become like them," he said, his voice hardening. Before I could respond, the growl erupted again, louder this time, closer. Then I saw it, a faint light flickering ahead in the shadows of the room. "If we can reach that," he said, eyes gleaming with determination, "it might lead us out." But as we moved forward, I took a deep breath, knowing that whatever waited for us on the other side would shape our fate. And right then, I understood the true nightmare was just beginning. The walls of the factory seemed to close in around me as I sprinted through the labyrinth, the shadowy figures' growls echoing in my ears. My heart raced, pounding against my ribcage like a drum of impending doom. I didn't look back, I couldn't afford to waste any time. The flickering lights ahead promised some kind of exit, and I chased them with relentless determination. I burst through another door, praying for a safe space. This room was bigger, chaotic and battery-lit. In the center, an array of screens lit up with static noise and hazy images. I heard a voice gasp, "You found him," and from behind the screens, a group of disheveled faces appeared, eyes wide with fear and desperation. Just when I thought I was free, I realized they were trapped, hunted just like me. "No!" A frantic cry pierced my thoughts, snapping me back to the reality of my own escape. The door behind me shuddered under pressure, and I sensed the dark figure pushing through. The growls intensified, rich with hunger and fury. I had to find a way out now. "Help!" I yelled, desperately waving the keycard ID found earlier. One of the bound figures, a young woman, nodded vigorously. "The exit's past that door. Hurry!" Her voice compelled me, igniting a glimmer of hope in the despair that I spun around, affirmation pushing me forward as I darted to the adjacent door. I felt the factory itself tremble as the creature bore down behind me, dreading the moment when I would feel its breath on my neck. Without hesitation, I slammed the keycard against the reader, praying it would work. The door swung open, revealing a narrow hallway bathed in eerie, red emergency lights. "Go!" Someone whispered from behind, and I stepped into the darkness that I raced down the corridor, frantic breaths echoing against the steel walls. Adrenaline surged as I heard the thud of heavy footsteps closing in. I risked a glance over my shoulder. The dark silhouette was gaining on me, lunging with unnerving speed that I reached an intersection, glancing left and right. My instinct screamed for me to take a sharp left where I could see daylight filtering through another door. But then the growl erupted again, subtly shifting my suspension into clouded panic. Choose. I yelled at myself. I didn't really have time, but I needed to outsmart the predator behind me that I bolted left, pushing past another door and outside, where the cool morning air collided with the heat of fear still clinging to my skin. It felt invigorating but fleeting as I spotted a high fence looming nearby. I had to climb over before the creature emerged behind me. Adrenaline spurred me faster than thought as I jumped and grasped at the topward barbed wire fence. Using any strength I could muster, I hoisted myself over, feeling the sharp pricks on my legs, barely registering the pain. I tumbled down the other side and hit the ground with a thud that I took in my surroundings, an endless stretch of recovery space, grounded by grass and littered with debris. I scrambled to my feet, breathless, glancing back at the factory. The door I came through slammed open. The figure appeared, taller than life, its form twisting eerily against the light, its growl vibrating with malicious intent. I turned, merging into the shadows of the surrounding buildings, my heart still racing that I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as I crouched behind a storage container, the adrenaline still pumping through me. Had I truly escaped? Was it really gone? I peered into the depths of the factory, watching as lights flickered sporadically, a haunting dance of uncertainty. I don't know how long I stayed hidden, fear enclosing me like an old friend. Part of me wanted to turn back, to find the others, to make sense of what had happened. But I could still hear the echoes of growls in the distance. Eventually, the world went silent. With cautious breaths, I stood, taking in what had just happened. I still can't make sense of it all. I still think about that factory, the faces I'd seen, the screams buried in static. Were the spirits of those forgotten souls still trapped there? Or were they mere images of the madness I'd witnessed? I took a slow step back, glancing at the entrance where shadows danced menacingly, and with every ounce of my being, I turned away, knowing I may never try to find answers again. That I moved to a small town far from that place, but sometimes, late at night, whispers creep into my mind just when I think I've buried it deep. What really happened in that factory? I may never know. And perhaps that uncertainty is far more terrifying than anything that lurked in the shadows.